he was putting a screwdriver in her neck.
There are 185 prisoners on death row in the state of Texas. This is part 7 of the series. Charles Flores, 54 years old, 24 years on death row. For the 1998 murder of Elizabeth Black, Charles Don Flores received a death sentence. Eyewitness testimony collected through investigative hypnosis was the foundation for his conviction. Black's next-door neighbor, Jill Barganier, remembered seeing two guys outside her house the morning of the murder. According to the brief, Barganier's hypnotized composite sketch does not resemble Flores in any manner. Even after the hypnosis, Barganier still failed to recognize Flores in a lineup. But at trial, after a period of time and the case had polluted her memory due to media coverage, she gave an in-court identification of Flores that resulted in his conviction. Joel Escobedo, 61 years old, 24 years on death row. In 1999, a jury found Joel Escobedo guilty of capital murder for shooting and killing a 65-year-old man at a bus stop in Houston in 1998. After being robbed and pistol-whipped, Guadalupe Garcia was shot. Escobedo is one of more than a dozen prisoners who were assessed by psychologist George Denkowski and ended up on Texas death row. Denkowski received criticism from a state medical board for using improper assessment techniques in criminal cases.
Texas reprimanded a psychologist who used what critics say were unscientific methods to examine at least 25 death row prisoners for intellectual disabilities, 2 of whom were later executed. In a settlement, Dr. George Denkowski agreed to stop performing similar evaluations in criminal cases and to pay a fine of $5,500. Dr. Denkowski was the go-to psychologist for prosecutors who wanted to prove defendants were not mentally handicapped and therefore eligible for the death penalty. His reliability earned him the nickname Dr. Death among defense lawyers.
What does the term mental retardation mean to you? What does the term mental retardation mean to you? Tell me what you think it is.
Somebody who's who don't know much. Don't know what other people don't know.
Okay, that's kind of generally it.
That was Dr. George Denkowski testing Daniel Plata. A judge later said the evaluation was full of fatal errors and commuted Plata's death sentence to life.
Charles Thompson, 53 years old, 24 years on death row. On April 30th, 1998, Thompson received a death sentence for the murders of his girlfriend, Denise Hayslip, and her other partner, Darren Kane. Thompson gained notoriety in 2005 when, after being sentenced to death a second time at a resentencing hearing, he escaped from the Harris County Jail in Houston, Texas by posing as an employee of the Attorney General's office and using a fake ID badge. 4 days later, while intoxicated, using a payphone outside a liquor store in Shreveport, Louisiana, he was apprehended. He told detectives that by pretending to be a Hurricane Katrina evacuee, he was able to obtain food and clothing. Also, he received money from Shreveport's Good Samaritans. 90% of the people who watch my channel are not subscribed. If you find my videos interesting, please hit that subscribe button. It will help me a lot in reaching more people on the platform. Thanks in advance. Ruben Gutierrez, 46 years old, 24 years on death row. Scholastica Harrison, 85 years old, was murdered on September 5, 1998 in Brownsville by Ruben Gutierrez and his co-defendants Rene Garcia and Pedro Gracia Garza Jr. In order to rob the victim of the money she stored in a safe, Gutierrez and his fellow defendants broke into the victim's office. She was fatally stabbed multiple times in the head. Ruben received a death sentence in 1999, even though he took part in the robbery, but he did not kill the victim. His co-defendant Garcia, who had accused Ruben, received a life sentence.
Justice needs to be served.
Alex Hernandez is the nephew of Scholastica Harrison, who was brutally murdered in her Brownsville home back in 1998. Ruben Gutierrez was found guilty of her murder and has been on death row for the past 20 years.
Gutierrez was set to be executed last June of 2020, and at the last minute the Supreme Court stepped in and halted the execution because they wanted to hear his point that he was raising, that he said that he was entitled to have a spiritual advisor lay hands on him as the execution was being carried out.
Hernandez and his family are not on board with Gutierrez's latest appeal to have a pastor present during his execution.
Sounds kind of crude, but I mean, did he ask my aunt if she wanted a pastor, when he was putting a screwdriver in her neck?
Today, Gutierrez filing a motion for DNA testing in his murder conviction. Hernandez says this is a way for him to buy time, but all he wants is closure.
We can be at peace. We can be at rest. We don't have to worry about, is this guy gone or not? It's done. And like I said, we can remember everything good about my aunt.
The DA says Gutierrez has exhausted all state appeals and are moving to his federal appeals. They hope to have an update later this year.
Richard Vasquez, 44 years old, 24 years on death row. A jury found Vasquez guilty of capital murder in June 1999 for the March 5, 1998 death of Miranda Lopez, a toddler. Vasquez, who was 18 years old, shared a home with his parents, Brenda Lopez, his fiancée, their 4-month-old daughter Megan, and Miranda, Brenda's 4-year-old daughter. Vasquez had a significant heroin and cocaine addiction. Vasquez claims that he and Brenda argued all through the night of March 4th, during which he injected heroin and cocaine before passing out in the early hours of March 5th. At 10:30 a.m., Vasquez gave himself another heroin injection before driving Brenda to work between 11 a.m. and noon while the kids sat in the back seat. Vasquez became enraged with Brenda along the way since he had to keep an eye on the kids. After they got back home, Vasquez got upset because he could not find the drugs, and he admitted that even if the 4-year-old girl did nothing wrong, he hit her in the head. He instructed Miranda to go get a stool from his parents' room in order to wash her teeth. Vasquez asserted that Miranda fell to the ground when she returned with the stool. After brushing her teeth with toothpaste, he left the room. Miranda was lying face down in the sink when he returned. She continued falling down despite his repeated attempts to get her to stand. Around 1:30 p.m., he placed her on his parents' bed and dialed 911, informing the operator that Miranda was choking. Vasquez claimed Miranda bit him when he put his finger in her mouth to stop her from swallowing her tongue, and the little girl had blood on her nose and mouth. Miranda had a lump on the back of her head, obvious bruises on her back in different stages of healing, and bruising around her eyes which suggested a possible brain injury according to the paramedics. The neurosurgeon testified that the little girl had brain injuries that were equivalent to those she would have sustained had she been ejected from a car traveling 65 miles per hour. When Miranda was checked by SA nurse Lynn Box at 7 p.m., she was found to have significant bruising on her head, face, chest, hips, pelvis, genitalia, ankle, leg, shoulder, back, and arms. Some of these bruises were the results of wounds sustained in the previous 12 to 24 hours. Miranda's hips had bruises that were consistent with those that may result from being grabbed from behind while being essayed. The amount of cocaine in Miranda's bloodstream was possibly fatal, according to a blood analysis. It was 2 times the level at which an adult would die. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.